Services, GOP lawmakers write, quote, according to Vanity Fair, Daszak immediately engaged in a cover-up of the origins of COVID-19. They wrote that he and a small group of scientists, quote, worked in concert to present the lab leak hypothesis as a groundless and destructive conspiracy theory.
Fox's Brooke Singman. A Missouri bill would slap restrictions on how race is talked about in public K through 12 schools. The GOP-led House voting 85-59 in favor of the measure, with some Republicans opposing the measure. Students, parents, and teachers could file complaints with the state AG or the state education department. I'm CJ Papa. This is Fox News.
WPTV First Alert Weather on WSTU is brought to you by Code Red Roofers. Code Red Roofers cares and calls you back. Shows up and finishes on time. 287-2829. Code Red Roofers, the roofers who respond. Now here's the First Alert meteorologist.
Your WPTV First Alert forecast calls for temperatures this morning in the 60s and low 70s under partly cloudy skies. This afternoon, comfortable with low humidity, highs in the low 80s and breezy winds coming in out of the northeast, cranking up to 25 miles per hour at times. Tomorrow and Friday, highs in the low 80s will stay breezy, partly sunny, and some isolated inland showers and storms possible on Friday. For the weekend, rain chances go up a touch. We'll start off the day with morning coastal rainfall, followed by afternoon inland showers and storms. Highs in the low 80s through the weekend forecast. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Katya Hall for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning and welcome back. It's another hump day here on the Treasure Coast, and of course another beautiful day. Sunny as almost always, and we have a wonderful show on tap that I'm really anxious to talk about today. And we're going to have Dr. Beth Falls. She's here with Team ORCA, and she's going to talk about some pollution mapping that ORCA has done. But before that, as always, I have to thank my sponsors. First was Commercial Mortgage. COVID, unexpected expenses and illnesses. There are many issues that can cause your successful business to slump deep into the red. We are here to help, and we only get paid if we provide you a debt workout. Debt restructuring is complicated. We are the negotiator between you and your creditors. Commercial Mortgage has been in the industry of small balance corporate finance since 2003. Our focus is on challenging corporate foreclosures, debt restructures, equity, and new debt solutions. These issues are often not easy to see or understand when you run a business and are faced with multifaceted debt challenges that include legal actions on various fronts. That's where we come in. We never charge a front fee or deposit. We are only paid if we successfully provide you a debt workout. Areas of expertise include hotels, marinas, office buildings, restaurants, apartments, multifamily, condos, golf courses, home builders, and land development, including new and repurposed developments. Call Commercial Mortgage LLC at 772-872-6099, 872-6099, or visit us online at commercialmortgagellc.com. Also, you got to remember the best kept secret in Martin County is the Fish House Art Center. It's down in the Pocket in Port Salerno, and what a fun place to go. There is something there for the entire family, and it's a great time right now to go out there and visit the Fish House Art Center. They have local artists and Airbnb if you want to stay out there. Might have family from out of town or friends. They have an art gallery, boat charters, a marina, craft and creamery that has craft beers, wine, and 24 flavors of ice cream. You can rent a paddleboard, you can rent bikes. I mean, there's just literally something there for everybody. That's the Fish House Art Center. It's down in Port Salerno in the pocket. You can look them up online before you head out, thefishhouseartcenter.com. And also, I have to say it as I do here last few weeks, hurricane season is right around the corner. And I can tell you and assure you that once a hurricane is named, it is almost impossible to find safe storage for your boat. So have peace of mind. Get your reservation today, and you can do that at the best boat storage facility in South Florida, and that is Indiantown Marina. They are located inland on the Okeechobee Waterway. They are very, very well protected hurricane hull. You're not going to find much safer than Indiantown Marina. So give them a call, 772-631-3272. Trust me, just get your reservation in, and then when the hurricane's named, you don't have to worry like everybody else will be doing. And also, it's a do-it-yourself and full-service boat yard, so if you need any work done or want to work on your boat yourself, take it out to Indiantown Marina. It's the place to go. So in the studio today, again, we have Dr. Beth Falls. She's a research scientist with Team ORCA, which is Ocean Research and Conservation Organization. Dr. Falls, thank you so much for coming in today. We saw some pollution mapping that ORCA has done, and you came in to kind of discuss those things. So if you're on Facebook, you're going to be able to see some slides of the pollution mapping that they've been doing, and they'll also be posted on Vimeo and YouTube afterwards that you can find through my website, thecaseyingramshow.com. Dr. Falls, so thank you for coming in today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you folks did the studies.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So I started working at ORCA in 2008, which seems like not that long ago.
For sure.
So
that was a really tough time in the economy,
it
though.
It was, and that's a whole other story
Right.
about ORCA. It was a hard time to keep ORCA going.
I bet.
So Dr. Edie Witter started ORCA in 2005, and initially she started it thinking it would be a technology organization. So I think a lot of people know about our Kilroys, our water monitors that are out in the lagoon 24/7 collecting data. And so her first hires were engineers, and that is still a cornerstone of ORCA. But a few years in, she recognized that she needed ORCA needed a science component, an ecotoxicity component to complement the data that was coming in from ORCA.
Okay.
And so she hired me. And interestingly, it was a little back and forth because my background's in human health.
Okay.
And so I initially said, I don't know how to do that, but she really wanted to take a different approach to the science we do at ORCA and really treat the lagoon the way that a doctor treats patients. And so lots of excellent marine science, environmental science organizations studying the Indian River Lagoon, doing really great work. So what ORCA tries to do is fill in the gaps and do the things that no one else is doing. And so really what we do is we try to very simply identify where pollution is accumulating in the lagoon and track it back to its source, and then work with a whole wide range of partners to stop pollution at its source upstream.
100%. The sources, I'm sure, are wide and varied, and that's one thing that is really tough to pinpoint. So this mapping that you had put out is astounding. It's a color mapping, and you can see there's definitely hot spots here in the South Fork, and I think you've done this pollution other places besides the South Fork.
I actually counted up just yesterday. We have mapped in the entire Indian River Lagoon and contributing waters 70 miles of different areas.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So originally, again, 2008, our goal was to map the entire lagoon, but financially, we
can only do what you can do with the money you have at the time.
Exactly. So we're piecemealing it together.
Well, this has been absolutely huge. Again, we're speaking with Dr. Beth Falls. She is from ORCA, Ocean Research and Conservation Organization. Some of you may have remembered, some of you long-time listeners, that Dr. Witter was here in the studio just a couple of years ago. And if I recall, she's discovered the largest squid underwater.
She got the first images.
And
actually,
it was huge.
Yeah, in Japan and then in the Gulf.
It's like a 16-foot long, I think. It was very huge anyways. but anyways, you guys do so much fabulous work, not only here in the Treasure Coast, but obviously worldwide. If you have a question for Dr. Falls, you can call into the studio, 772-220-9788. That's 220-WSTU. Or I'm also looking here on Facebook Live. You can type in a question, and I'll certainly pass that on to Dr. Falls and run it by her. So, Dr. Falls, let's start getting into the mapping a little bit. How many sites were sampled here in the South Fork? We'll narrow it down to that.
So what makes these projects unique is simply how hard we work. So the idea is that when we map an area, we do very dense sampling, and then we collect a lot of samples and get a lot of data within that area. Because as you said, and we say constantly, it's really complicated. So there are no easy answers. And so, for example, in the South Fork, we collected samples from 65 discrete sites. So that's map 2. Shows the our sampling sites.
So for folks that may be new to the area, the South Fork, that's by the Roosevelt Bridge down how far south?
We went to where the canal feeds in, I think it's a C-44, comes in from Lake Okeechobee.
Perfect.
So right to that, where that water comes in is where we started, and then we went to right where kind of that would go under the Roosevelt Bridge.
Okay. And again, map number 2 shows many of those sites. When you're taking these samples, tell us what's involved with that. Is that using the Kilroy symptom?
No, this is not Kilroy's.
Okay.
So this is, we have Kilroy's around. I know we have a Kilroy on the Palm City Bridge, so we can kind of look at these data sets together. But what we do at each of these sites, so what we do before we go out is we look at the area, and the EPA puts out sort of a grid guide for how to do these types of projects. So we grid and select sampling sites. We do it actually more densely than that guideline suggests.
Okay.
And then additionally, we add other sites. So we go into all the canals. We look for any potential inputs. If we see through our reconnaissance if there's any obvious runoffs or drainage pipes or things like that, or eddies.
Things that look like they possibly could be a point of pollution.
And so that's the idea. So we get funding from generous donors, and we make the best use of our money. So when we're done with these projects, we want to make sure that we didn't miss anything.
Okay.
And so we go out, and at each of these 65 sites, we anchor our boat front and back, turn off the engine, and then we collect water quality data, so all the typical salinity, dissolved oxygen, those types of things. And then we collect water samples, and then we measure muck depth. So
how do you do that?
Muck. Well, so that's a fun story. We do it very simply. So early on, when we realized we had to do this, we tried using like sounder systems on the bottom of the boats, and we actually contracted and paid a bunch of money for someone to do it for us, and the data was not good. And so we finally realized, which sometimes seems to be our way. We try the hard way first, and then we did go the simplest way. So what we do is we just have a retractable pole that's marked by centimeters. And what you do is you just push it down till it hits hard bottom.
Okay.
And then we measure water depth, because the water depth pings off the top of the muck.
Okay.
And we just subtract the difference.
Oh, that makes sense.
Simple. Yeah.
Now, this legacy muck, we've all talked about it. There's a lot of pollutants that are in the muck itself.
Right.
Was the muck always there, or is this something that's kind of brought in by the discharges and runoff?
It's not always there. I mean, some places in swampy areas and things where organic material degrades. But for the most part, it's not. It shouldn't be there. The bottom should be sandy. It should have seagrass. There should be lots of things living down there in that benthic area. So no, it's definitely not.
And Dr. Falls, I've spoken with so many people that lived here in the 60s and 70s, and they said you would not believe how different the river
100%.
Was back then. It had that sandy bottom.
Right.
It was beautiful. Let's step back 1 second to the Kilroy, because I've got a rock song going through my mind that was named a Kilroy. What is a Kilroy?
So the Kilroy is actually, that's why Edie named it Kilroy, or Edie and the engineers early on, because they wanted, so Kilroy was here, was at World War II.
Yes.
So the idea was they wanted Kilroys everywhere.
Yes.
And so that's where the name came from.
Interesting. It was either Vietnam or World War II, I'm not sure which, but yes, that is what it was. That's fascinating. I didn't realize that.
Kilroys are deployed out, and what they do is they provide continuous data, because things are complicated, especially in the water. Water is moving, and water is not consistent throughout the whole water column. And so by gathering continuous data, you get a much more accurate picture of what's going on. And so that's not my area, so I can't say exactly how many we have deployed, but I know we have, I want to say like in the 15 range, and I probably am wrong.
Okay, right.
But we'll be adding more, and they go all the way up and down the Indian River Lagoon. So Kilroy, so I should say at ORCA, because we're a nonprofit, not affiliated with any anybody.
Right.
All of our data is open source. And so you can actually get on our website and look at that live feed data from Kilroy. So a lot of scientists, a lot of government agencies look at that. Fishermen look at it. So
very important. That's teamorca.org is your website.
Team.orca.org, yes. And then there's like a little button that says live Kilroy feed.
Very cool. Yes. Very cool. Let's jump over here. Iggy, if you can go to slide number 1 about the muck depth. You were just talking about that. Folks that are listening on the radio, there's it's in different colors, red being the deepest, yellow, blues, and greens. Can you tell us a little bit about this slide, Dr. Falls?
Yes. Let me just find it real quick. Sorry. So we measure muck depth, and we're constantly astonished by how much muck is there.
Right. Right.
So I can tell you when we're first starting out in 2008, trying to figure out our methods, there was a scientist, Scott Jones at Smithsonian, that helped us kind of get started. And so he went out, and Jerry Corsat, who is just an amazing person who could do anything, kind of helped us figure out how to do some of our collections. The three of us would go out, and originally our plan was to collect the bivalves that live in the muck, because bivalves are bioaccumulators, so we could test those and see what was accumulating. And what we found is we didn't find any.
Oh.
Because it's all just muck.
Okay.
There's nothing living in there.
And it looks like, too, like if you're looking at the slide, where it starts to bottleneck, it really accumulates. It can't flow through. Right. You see some areas where it's deep red. It's almost like it can't flow there.
Right. And that's the thing. And that's why we do these maps. So we understand where things are accumulating, because as you said before, the muck itself is a source of pollution.
Right.
And so you can see these red areas, it is greater than 9 feet of muck.
9 feet of muck.
That's incredible. I mean, we've lost poles because we push down so far and it builds a suction, and we can't even get them back up.
Wow.
But you can see, like, it's and this was actually, these maps were really interesting because they were different than when we do our mapping in the lagoon itself.
Okay.
Because of the flow. There's so much flow.
Right.
So some of these blue spots are actually unique. We often see a more consistent accumulation.
Okay.
And so that's really interesting here.
The blue is really the least depth, right? The dark blue.
Right, the darkest of blue. Yeah, because you can see even the lighter blue is like between 1 and 4 feet. And so it's pretty consistent. It's rare that we see areas that don't have at least a foot of muck now.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, there are still some sandy bottoms, but less and less.
Not very much anymore. And folks, you can go to teamorca.org. And are these slides on your website?
They are. Yes. All of our maps from all of our pollution mapping up and down the lagoon is on our website.
Perfect. Highly recommend. If you can't see them right now on our Facebook Live feed, definitely look this up. Let's go to slide number 3, Iggy, and tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Falls. It's the TOC sediment.
Okay.
I don't know what TOC is.
TOC is total organic carbon.
Okay.
So that is just the carbon that's telling us like how much organic carbon, how much live.
Is that good or bad?
Well, it's there, so there's not really, except for muck. I would say muck is pretty much bad.
Right.
Otherwise, we're talking about balance. I mean, total organic carbon, there's going to be organic carbon in the system because there's living things that are dying. And so it's about balance.
Okay.
And so when you get high levels, then that's indicating that there's organic material that is breaking down and settling in the lagoon.
Okay.
So I don't know how much sidebar you want me to go into, but one of the issues that the lagoon, how we've gotten to this position, I mean, again, there's many, many contributors, but one of the things is just all of the grass that gets into the lagoon.
Yes.
And so our grass is organic because it's living. And so we actually have a project where we are working to get people to put in buffers on their waterfront property.
So when they're mowing the lawn or whatnot, it doesn't blow in.
Yes.
What about the seagrass that's dying? I mean, we've seen the photos. It used to be green bottom and now it's sandy.
Yeah. Again, complicated. It's accumulation of all of the things that we've talked about. Certainly seagrass can't live in muck. It just won't grow in the muck. And so, but there's other things in other areas of the lagoon.
That'll go there.
It has to do with algae blooms that keep the light out, and there's all kinds of things.
A lot of contributing factors.
Right, which ties to the nutrients that we test as well.
Okay. We have a comment here on Facebook, Dr. Falls. Brent Wallenberg, 5 years ago I measured the acidity of the west shore of the lagoon and found it was acidic as vinegar. From remembering old dragline buckets that were still in the water and looking at historic US 1 roadbed, it was pretty obvious historic lagoon west shore was high pH calcium shell. Wherever I put calcium back on shore, the seagrass has come back from the shore as far as one can see out. It's interesting.
It is interesting. So certainly, again, I'm not an expert on acidification and changing in pH, but that is a concern. It's certainly a concern to our bivalves.
Right.
And we used to have clam farmers, and I know that is slowly going away.
Okay.
And so again, I think that is a balance, and we try to consider things like that. So like when he was talking about the putting the calcium.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we actually, when we build living shorelines, we do it with things that can kind of try to help lower the pH or to calcify.
Okay.
Or
to make it more alkaline as opposed to acidic.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's a really good point. We are starting to measure alkalinity in all of our samples. So, I mean, there's a lot of problems.
A lot of problems, and there's a lot of things to measure.
Right. There's a lot of things to measure. Right.
Iggy, if you can put up slide number 4, this is PW glyphosate. We know glyphosate is bad. PW, what is that?
That's pour water.
Okay.
So glyphosate is an herbicide. Again, sorry, I'm a scientist. I don't like bad and good. I mean, glyphosate, right?
No, that's good, yes.
Right. So herbicides, I mean, there's a role for herbicides, right?
They're needed.
I mean, we need to be able to, these canals need to be navigable, or water needs to be able to flow through them. I mean, we got to get out the vegetation.
Right.
So the idea is how much you use, where you use it, and how it's getting into the waterways.
Okay.
And so I think understanding that is why we do this. So the pour water, so when we talk about a water column sample, we just go in and we grab water from, like, basically it's the EPA method is basically like 0.3 or a third of a meter.
Okay.
But it's usually your elbow. So you go in and you grab a water sample. That's grab water sample. Pour water is when you take that muck or sediment and you centrifuge it, and it's the water that comes out. So it's the water that kind of lives in that benthic area.
Okay.
And
very interesting.
So that's why the reason we look at glyphosate in the pour water is because potentially we're interested in seeing what's kind of sticking around down there.
And as we look at that slide, I have to say it's probably one of the less glaring ones as far as the reds and the yellows. There is some, but it's a little clearer than I probably would have anticipated it to be.
Right. But that's, again, this is because of the pour water. So it's probably, we find it pretty consistently, but at very, very low levels.
Okay.
So one of the things that we talk about with these different samples is like, what's a healthy value? Like what below which are we not concerned?
Okay.
No one really knows for glyphosate because it's fairly new, thinking about like how much can be in the ecosystem and what effect it has. So the purpose for doing this is what we do is we look at those hot spots and we look at where it is accumulating so we can try to figure out where it's coming from and stop it.
Right.
So it's we're constantly having these conversations like, ultimately, it'd be very, very interesting to do studies and see how much glyphosate it has, what effects, but what we do at ORCA is try to stop it at its source.
100%. I think that's where it needs to be stopped as well. And as I look at this glyphosate slide, it's interesting. I'm trying to think what could possibly be around there. It looks like it's a lot of a residential area, interestingly enough. Mm-hmm. So I think that this is one of the reasons with the mapping. What caused it there? And then you guys,
and we go
somebody
upstream,
can look.
And we go upstream. And a lot of times it might just be putting in a buffer or something else, or just putting in a swale so there's not runoff runoff or something like that.
And the glyphosate is one of the things that they're concerned about with the seagrass. That really the legacy muck has been one of the things that has killed off the seagrass over the years because it accumulates in the muck potentially.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the
and
speculations.
Thank you. And Dr. Falls, I'm going to say this. I love how you said it's not bad and good. You're not trying to put blame on anybody. These things are products that are needed and we use. We got to learn how to
find the balance,
live together and live in balance. So I really do appreciate you putting it that way. So what, besides glyphosate, I know the EPA had said that in drinking water, 700 parts per billion is the limit for safety. 1 part per billion is like a drop of ink in an Olympic swimming pool. So when you're actually finding it, do you know how many parts per billion it registers when you find it in the lagoon?
Yes, it should be here, right? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no,
here,
it's fine. I just have to find the right map.
I've got map number 4 for glyphosate.
I can't read. This is too small.
Me too.
Okay, here we go. So the red here looks like 1.2. This would be parts per billion.
Okay.
Well, nanograms per liter is the same as parts per billion.
There you go. Okay. So we're going to go over one more slide before we take a break, and then we're going to give you a moment here to rest a little bit. But we're going to go to slide number 5, toxicity sediment. And there's a lot of red on that slide.
Right. So that's great. So when Dr. Witter hired me, I walked into an empty lab with a machine that measured relative toxicity. So that's where it all started. And what we do actually, because there are so many toxicants and toxins in the system, and it's really impossible to measure each one. It's so expensive. And so what we do is kind of like a triage approach. So we measure relative toxicity. So it doesn't tell you what it's interestingly it uses a bioluminescent bacteria, which is interesting because of Edie's background in bioluminescence. But what it does is this bioluminescent bacteria, it just glows. When it's happy, it's glowing.
Okay.
And so you measure how much it's glowing, and then you expose it to your sample, and you let it incubate, and then you measure it again.
Okay.
And then it's a really robust assay where if there's no toxicity, the light isn't diminished.
They glow. They're very happy yet.
And then if it's really toxic, it turns it off entirely.
That is fascinating.
And then anywhere in between.
Okay.
So what the toxicity map tells us is in the sediment relative to all the other sites we measure, how toxic is that particular site?
So this is So this is based against other sites you've measured in the Indian River Lagoon.
Right.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible.
But there's tons of potential toxins, and that was sort of when we first got started. We were like, we didn't expect to see these bright red maps.
Right.
And so again, it's super complicated because the more silt, the more of that clay, mucky stuff, the more toxic it's going to be because those have more binding sites, so it binds to chemicals that could potentially impact these bacteria. And some, there are some natural toxins in the environment that aren't unhealthy.
Right.
So the idea is just to look again at relative toxicity and then look at what inputs are.
So as we're looking at this slide number 5, I always think about the discharges. This makes it a little different from other areas of the Indian River Lagoon because we have these discharges that come all the way from Lake Okeechobee. So, we have fresh water coming into brackish water, and it all obviously it looks like a bottleneck here and it accumulates. So, it would lead one to believe, and you probably can't say for sure, but you would lead one to believe that the discharges add to this.
Well, the discharges certainly. That basically and there are. This is what makes this unique is that canal is bringing water from Lake Okeechobee.
Yes,
but there are many canals that come in due to other parts of the lagoon, big ones and small ones. And so when you think about from as far out west as they start, they're accumulating everything that's running off from that watershed and carrying it in.
Through,
so
Lake it comes down from the Kissimmee River. It's coming from a long way. So.
Exactly. And so that's the thing. But I think that certainly those those canals are contributors, and they all bring fresh water and the issues that are associated with that. But there's also a lot of urban runoff, and I think that that's been kind of a little bit surprising in that, you know, we all kind of think it's just the canals, but
there's more to it.
There's a lot of local sort of what we would consider more low-hanging fruit. Again, the grass, the waterfronts. We surveyed the waterfront of the lagoon and found every single parcel that has basically grass planted right up to the heart of seawall.
Yes.
And so that's direct runoff every time there's a big rain. And 63% of waterfront properties in Martin County have that. So when you think about the cumulative effect over time, if we just start transitioning some of those to having, putting in buffers, and just quickly, we received a runner-up grant from Impact 100 Martin yesterday.
Wonderful.
$40,000, and that's to start to address this, putting more buffered shorelines on these properties.
When you say a buffered shoreline, can you tell us what that is, and then we're going to go to break.
I ramble. A buffered shoreline is it's a vegetative buffer. So like when you think about how we put in hardened shorelines, these seawalls, because we thought that was the right thing to do to protect from storm protection. We now know that living shorelines are actually more protective, but we all have, including myself, a seawall.
Yes.
And so when you plant turf grass right up to the edge, then every time there's a big rain, everything that's accumulated on that grass since the last rain just flows right into the water.
Okay.
And including grass clippings.
Right.
And so there's this thing called the first flush. The first flush is like the first few minutes where it just all runs in.
Okay.
So if you put in this vegetative buffer, just 6 to 8 feet with deep-rooted native plants, that captures that first flush.
Okay.
And so it just dramatically reduces
kind of
runoff.
A net. Again, we're speaking with Dr. Beth Falls from ORCA, and we're going to be back. We have a lot more slides to look at here, and we're going to talk about nitrates and phosphates and copper and all kinds of stuff. So we will be right back in just a couple minutes.
Forbearances, working remotely, internet shopping, retail space, and rental income have been hit hard by COVID. If you're looking to restructure your debt, obtain financing or equity, Commercial Mortgage can help you out. Tim Mullen at Commercial Mortgage has been providing debt restructuring services since 2003. Tim never charges a front fee and all consultations are free. Tim only gets paid if he provides you a debt workout. Looking for a debt solution or financing? Give Tim a call at 772-872-6099 or visit commercialmortgagellc.com to schedule your free consultation.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You're listening to The Casey Ingram Show on WSTU Digital 1450. Call in with questions and comments at 220-9788. 220-WSTU. And now back to the show.
Well, welcome back. In the studio today, we have Dr. Beth Falls. She is with ORCA, Ocean Research and Conservation Organization. TeamORCA.org is their website, and we're going over some pollution mapping that ORCA has done here on the South Fork, and they've done it in other places as well, but we are focusing on the South Fork here today, which runs from the Roosevelt Bridge south over to really the locks, and they've done a lot of mapping that's really helping us with our water quality and determine why there's pollutants in it, where it might be coming from, and folks, anybody that's lived here for any amount of time, you know how important our water is to us and how much difficulty it has been in certain years where we have a lot of pollutants and toxic algae and that kind of thing. And there's a lot of different reasons why we have poor water quality. bacteria in the water and whatnot. And that's where ORCA has really stepped up to the plate to try and help us determine where some of it is, where it's coming from. And these maps are absolutely fascinating, folks. For those of you that are on the radio and can't see the show, you can look it up online afterwards at my Facebook page, The Casey Ingram Show. You can go to my website and look under the archives. And my website's thecaseyingramshow.com. And, of course, go to teamorca.org, and their slides are right there. I'm telling you, these are just mind-blowing how much information is on these slides. And before we get back into those, Dr. Falls, how are you paying for these things, and what can people do to help with this? This is so important.
Good. Thank you. So we get, for our science is funded exclusively from grants and donations. So this particular project was funded through, our funding came through the Community Foundation, Martin St. Lucie, which has been a great supporter. We've worked really hard with them because they really, I don't know if you know them, if you've had them on, but Elizabeth Barbella is really helped me hone our message, tell our story in a compelling way. So the first grant I submitted through her, so they do the Frances Langford Fund.
Oh, yes.
And they have a committee that does that.
Okay.
And so we didn't get it. But then she really talked with me saying, she was new and she was trying to understand who does what. And so really it's been a great partnership, if you will.
Definitely appreciate that.
So yeah, it's been great. So this particular grant was funded through 2 different funds through that foundation, through Frances Langford Fund, and then they have an environmental fund.
Okay. So very important, and I'm so grateful you shouted them out because I know that this is going to help us down the road as well. Do you continue to do more testing with the Southwark with this information? I mean, what are you doing with it now?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked because I will say that the nutrient maps are confusing. So we could talk literally hours about these because there's so much flow and so much the way that they're shaped, the wind stirs up the muck, and so they're not as straightforward as some of our other maps.
Okay.
And so what we do, we these are like a blueprint, if you will.
Okay.
And so in some cases, you can really look at them and say, well, this is clearly this runoff from here, so let's work to mitigate that. And other places, like, for example, the glyphosate that you saw or the copper map, we can look and say, this is really, there's a hot spot for this, so let's go upstream.
Okay.
And so we do some additional testing. We have these, they're called integrative samplers. So you deploy them in the water column, but they stay out for a week, so they accumulate.
Okay.
And so it's basically like daisy chaining upstream to try to track the source. So if you go upstream and it's high here and low here, then your source is somewhere in between. So we do that. And then the other thing that we do, in some cases, there are spots that we really need this. So as hard as we work to get these maps and as valuable as they are, it's a snapshot. It's a one-time. So some sites, and especially this is a good example because we do know there's all this flow. We need more testing.
Right.
And so we actually have a pollution mapping citizen science program where we train community members. And this is, if someone wants to get involved, we're looking for community foundation or Martin County citizen scientists right now.
Okay.
And so what we do is we literally train people like yourself who want to help, and they do the exact same science we do, but they do it at one site and then they do it quarterly. So we start to accumulate data over time. And so that's really valuable. So we got another grant through the Frances Langford Fund, and that is to bring this citizen science project into Martin County. And so we're going to be doing 2 pollution mapping sites within the South Fork. We're collaborating with Love and Hope in Action.
Okay.
And so we're going to work with their staff and some of their clients to do this ongoing monitoring.
That's absolutely exciting. And I know that there's residents in Martin County that would just do anything they can to help this. Right. And, folks that are, I'm assuming, living on the river would be a perfect target because they could have their spot in front of their house.
So we have specific sites.
Okay.
So, eventually we want to continue to add more. So we try to do this as low cost as possible.
Okay.
So a site costs $2,500 a year.
Okay.
For 4 samplings and all the data that you get.
Yes.
So we have 2 sites right now. So we have our site. We have 3 sites in the South Fork we're going to do.
Okay.
and then we also have a partner with the City of Stuart, their Parks and Recreation. It's going to do a site at Shepherd Park.
Got it.
And then we have some other sites in the basin and Central Stuart that we're looking for citizen scientists.
I love that. Let's move on to slide number 6. It's the water column nitrate slide.
Okay. So this is the one I was saying, like, we really could talk for a very long time about the nitrate and phosphorus. So the nutrients, I mean, everyone's talking about nutrients and where they're coming from because that's what feeds the algae blooms. And so we have to get our nutrients down. And nutrients come from a wide range of sources. They come from organic materials. But what really we're all concerned about is human impacts or human pollution when we talk about whether it's coming from septic tanks or sewers.
Right.
So understanding those sources is very, very important. Again, so you can stop it at its source.
And nitrates and phosphates are the two things we seem to hear about the most when we're talking about poor water quality.
Right. Because of that reason, because it feeds these algae blooms.
Right.
And again, they're natural we need nutrients in the lagoon. We just need them at a healthy level. When it gets above that healthy level is when the concern comes in. Because it gets the system out of balance and it feeds these algae blooms, which contribute to the muck, among other things.
And so with this nitrate slide, I mean, almost the entire North Fork is yellow on this slide, which is... red is the highest. It's red, a little deep, less red, orangey red, a little lighter orange, and then yellow. So there's a lot of nitrates, and there's a lot of the orange and the darker oranges on there as well. I mean, it's almost the entire area. It's incredible.
Which is what's different about this is we often, like if you compare that to the nitrate in sediment sample, or I think it's that we measure total nitrogen in the sediment versus nitrate, but normally we see a lot more red.
That's number 12?
The
total nitrogen sediment.
Number 12.
If you could put up 12, Iggy. That one's, what is the difference there? Because that one's very interesting. There's some definite red hot spots that are around there. I noticed some of them are even by some marinas.
Yeah, so again, there's no absolutes, but it seems to be that because there's so much flow and so because of this area that the sediment is moving around more, the muck is moving around, so that's releasing the nutrients into the water column. So we actually, even there are red spots, we often see the sediment total nitrogen being higher and then the water column being lower.
And it looks like with the total nitrate sediment, slide 12, the red spots are, again, bottleneck areas.
Right, exactly, where it's probably not a lot of flow and it's not getting stirred up.
I mean, some of them are even inland. I think I'm looking at Four Rivers. My map's very small, but, it's just in where it can't go anywhere. It's stuck.
Right, which is a lot of times that is an issue is that we put all these canals because we all want to live on the water, which, again, I live on a man-made canal. And so, but there's no flow. And so all
of that
gets
stuck there.
Yes.
Over the years.
And then when there's big boat action or wind action, it gets released and then it goes into the other part of
the main river. So. If we could move on to slide 7, water column total phosphorus.
So we think of phosphorus and nitrogen together because those are the two nutrients that we talk a lot about.
Okay, yes.
And so, again, this is a really weird one because especially in the sediment, are you looking at 11? Is that what you said?
7.
Oh, 7 is in the water column.
Yep, total phosphorus.
So again, we're seeing higher levels of phosphorus than we see in other maps in the water column, but we're seeing much lower in the sediment.
So and Iggy, that's number 11. If you can show that up, that's total phosphorus sediment, and that's almost completely blue except for one interesting little hot spot, which I'm sure that probably
it could be an eddy or somewhere.
Something that just kind of
yeah.
And the other thing I noticed with the first slide is 7 is most of the phosphorus is actually the closer it is to the southern portion of the South Fork is the heavier amounts of it.
Right. But it's also, that's back in sort of a canal where there's no flow, or a basin where
very little flow again. So there it's just sitting.
So just to kind of talk about how we tie this together, previously we did a mapping from the Roosevelt Bridge 2 miles east.
Oh, okay.
And that really was an interesting map because the middle of it was really red for these nutrients.
Wow.
But the shorelines weren't.
Where it was flowing.
So what we suspect is that the reason we're not seeing it all here is it's flowing
right
in there and then settling
the
out.
main flow area.
So that's why it's
very
important to look at all of this together.
Right.
I say 1,000 times a week it's complicated. And
True.
If anyone says it's easy and simple, then I don't think they understand
it. There's not one source.
Right. 100% not one source. That's why we map all these different areas.
Try and figure this out. Let's move on to slide 8. It's the lead sediment slide.
Okay.
That looks, fairly good.
Yeah, we traditionally don't see a lot of lead in the water, and so we just continue. So we depending on our funding, and we measure different heavy metals. I mean, again, it's good to see good stuff as well as bad stuff.
100%.
We want to know what's not a problem, right?
Right.
And so traditionally we don't see a lot of lead in the sediment, but we still try to look at it when we can.
And then let's move on here to slide number 9. This is an interesting one as well.
This is a very interesting
copper
one.
sediment.
Yes. So copper is an interesting one because copper is toxic to larval stages of many organisms that live in these water bodies.
Okay.
And so we are increasingly seeing copper. And so this is these are pretty high levels of copper. There's some hot spots.
The hot spots, again, are where it can't flow. I mean, some of them are pretty inland. It surprises me. There's an orange spot. It's just there's nowhere for the water to go. It's a little bit of a basin.
Yes,
off the river.
So this is one that we're going to do that follow up with the integrative samplers because of the way this map looks, like you point out, it's coming from these inputs. It is a very prime opportunity to stop it at its source if we can figure out where it's coming from.
Where would copper normally come from?
One of the potential sources of copper is our copper herbicides.
Okay.
And so an interesting thing about Florida, when you look at these maps, look at all of these retention ponds.
Right.
And,
it's a bunch.
And there are so many of them. And developers turn them into beautiful water that people want to live in and around. So they have to keep them pristine.
Right.
And so we got to be careful what we're putting into them because that flows into the water. And so that is a potential source of copper.
Okay.
There's others. There's also they used to have copper in boat paint.
Oh, yes.
I don't think they do anymore, but there could be legacy copper. So if the muck gets stirred up, it could be coming from there.
Right.
And so
there's been boats on these waters forever. There's some marinas here, and the legacy muck it does hold these things.
Right. And then when it gets stirred up or moved around. And that's the thing, no one ever does anything on purpose when we just didn't know. And so as we learn, we do better.
That's right. And that's what these pollution maps are telling us is, and again, I think we need to point that out. That doesn't mean these pollutants are happening today. They may not.
They may be. And that's why we want to go, and that's why we want to go in and go upstream and see if we can see a source.
Perfect. Let's move on to the next slide. It's mercury sediment. We all know mercury is bad. So that one actually doesn't look too bad, though.
It does not, which again is unusual. I think that has to do with the flow of the water in this
keeps it going.
Water body, yeah.
And it's also good because, that's something that fish accumulate is mercury.
Right. And so just thank you for that because we also have a fish monitoring citizen science project that we are very much interested in getting citizen scientists from Martin County for. We have we started it in Indian River County, so we have lots of fish from Indian River County, and now we had a push for Brevard, and they're doing really well. So we're really pushing for getting people from Martin County to help with donating fish, as well as helping with processing, collecting tissue, and then for people who are interested, come in and help with some of the analyses. And that's a really fun project to get involved with, and it's really interesting to see. People love it. Every person you can imagine, from retired CEOs to college students, are in there cutting up fish and saying, where's the liver, where's the stomach, and
something. It is. It's very interesting to find out what you're finding.
Yes.
And I have to say, Dr. Falls, I got to give a shout out here to our local Indian River keeper. They are always looking for volunteers as well to help monitor water conditions. So it seems like that would be a good partnership for your citizen scientists. And both of you.
And yes, I mean, I think we've known all of the river keepers.
Yes,
they've all been amazing, and so I know
very important organization as well. I love having them here in the studio. But yes, it's nice to have these organizations, folks. They're nonprofits. They really need our help, and they couldn't operate without the grants, the funding, and us.
And the citizen science, we started citizen science in 2019, and I cannot be happier about how it's going. We have over 1,500 people that have engaged in these projects at different levels, but we have people that are working as hard as any of us.
That
fabulous. Are in there, and it's really, it allows us to get a lot more data with lower money.
Yes.
And then it also, they become really educated. I mean, you don't understand something as well as when you're doing it. So then they become ambassadors and share what they know. And so it's a really, really exciting, excellent program.
It's very exciting, and so much, not only just for the water samples and water quality, but also the fish samples, as you were talking about. All of this is something that affects our health here in the lagoon. So where are you going to go next as far as with your testing?
With the
pollution mapping.
You mean where we're going to
do you've done the
our
North
next
Fork?
map?
Yes, you've done the South Fork, the North Fork.
So we don't have anything right now in our plans. We don't have funding for another project, but we would go into the South Fork next, so we could get that whole
further
area.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then we haven't done any mapping in the actual lagoon, the main part of the lagoon in Martin County.
Okay.
So we've done most of that in Indian River and Brevard. So going into the lagoon would be next as well.
Oh, that's absolutely fabulous. Yeah. So, when you're testing, some of this is naturally occurring. But when you're testing, that's what you're really pointing out, is if there's a hot spot, there's probably more than something natural.
Right, that's
happening.
right. And so that we kind of think of it like triage. So back to the human health aspect of it, like where are the worst spots? So for the pollution mapping citizen science project, we have people up and down the lagoon that are quarterly doing these sampling, and that allows us to rank the sites in from best to worst.
Okay.
And so then we put our efforts into those that are the worst. We kind of try that, 20% of the work that has 80% of the impact.
So, let's talk a little bit more too about the impacts of the health with these different pollutants that you have studied. I'm curious, why did you pick these pollutants? That would be copper, lead, phosphorus, nitrates.
So primarily because they're the ones that are most concerning to the lagoon. So when we started out, we only were doing toxicity and the nutrients, and then we slowly started adding others as the literature and as we had a better understanding of what was impacting the lagoon. So the idea is to stop pollution at its source. So we try to figure out what is the most concerning and monitor that. So, but I would like to kind of tie in the our One Health approach.
Okay.
Because One Health is understanding the interaction between human, animal, and environmental health.
Okay.
Because everything we do is from that perspective. Understanding that, really, if you want to point a finger, the finger is that all of us want to live here. There's just so many of us. But we should be able to live here and have a balance and have a healthy ecosystem. We just have to figure out how to do that.
Right.
And so that's where we really focus. But I would say that this cycle has come full circle now because we have so many of us live here and we're doing things unintentionally. It's gotten to the point now where it's affecting human health. And so really that's what we're trying to kind of connect those dots. So this One Health fish monitoring, what's unique about it, we don't do the reductionist typical basic science where we do a study and look at just mercury.
Okay.
Or within that same fish, we look at a wide array of pollutants
that are in his system.
And so then we also survey fishers to get an understanding of what fish and how much they're eating, so we can actually estimate exposure to human. And if nothing else, we can make our local medical community aware of what potential toxins or issues could arise in this population.
Brent said nitrates and phosphates are essential for all life. Their historic lagoon used to look like there was more fish than water.
Absolutely.
It's now dead as a swimming pool. Put the calcium back where it was and it'll come back. calcium could be part of it. But
Right. And I think that's the issue, is that I don't disagree with that, except for I disagree with saying that nutrients are not a problem.
Right.
I think nutrients are a problem. They're absolutely essential for life, but when they get exponentially higher than a healthy balance is, that's where you get the problems.
Breathing 100% oxygen,
Right.
It's not healthy for you over a long term. One other thing, who else is using this data? Because this is incredible data. Like, is the DEQ, anybody else saying, yeah, we need to look at this, point of source pollution? This data is helping us say, what's in this area that could be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like a whole list, but we certainly, I know all of the counties, the environmental resource managers and other organizations are looking at it and considering it as part of understanding the whole system. Yeah,
it's an incredible amount of data.
I like to stay in the lab, but we.
Glad you came out today.
Yeah, ORCA. We have we're part of a lot of kind of groups, and we share this as widely as we can. Certainly the Riverkeeper is someone who could use it. So it's pretty wide.
There's so many. And folks, I encourage you, if you live on the South Fork, if you live along the river, North Fork as well, take a look at the pollution mapping that ORCA has done, and maybe it's around your house, and maybe you'll identify something. And, you talked about the individual homes and the shorelines. Mm-hmm. There's miles and miles of individual homes. So maybe one person isn't doing much, but accumulating total, it adds up.
And if anyone who has that property reaches out to us, we can certainly be interested in putting a buffered shoreline on their property.
Oh, that's fabulous. And we got a couple minutes left. I want to remind everybody on May 4th, we're going to have Bob Inglis. He's the executive director of Republican Conservatives that are addressing climate change. We're also going to have Dr. Millay. He's the superintendent of Martin County School Districts on May 11, and May 18, Chairwoman Marilyn Mager from the Martin County Republican Party. So we've got a lot of great shows coming up. Dr. Falls, thank you so much for coming in today. And as we close out the show, we have about a minute. Tell us a little bit about, I know you folks were looking for a building a little while back. Can you give us an update on that?
Well, so we lost our headquarters. We'd been in since we were founded on Seaway Drive. And so we've been kind of in transit. It wasn't a very good time to lose it with the market. And so we've been working from home, but we do have a lab in Vero Beach. So nothing is disrupted as far as our work. But we have been looking for a new headquarters. And so we do have potentially a new headquarters we're looking at in Vero Beach.
Great.
In Central Vero. But we will be doing a capital campaign to help with that. Again, beyond my scope, but it's something that we will be looking forward to.
Well, we're all here very familiar with Team ORCA here on the Treasure Coast and the good work that you folks have been doing over the years. And this pollution mapping, again, very grateful. And I think it's going to be a huge help to help clean up our waters here in the future as we continue. Everybody's concerned about it, but sometimes we're doing things that we may not realize harming the water, just like mowing the lawn.
Right.
You don't think it's doing any harm, but
Sure.
Every one of us can do a little bit something to help clean up the lagoon, and let's hope we're going to get back to those sandy bottoms and blue waters that are full of fish like they were once.
Absolutely. That's our goal.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beth Falls. TeamORCA.org. Make sure to look them up, and if you can, help them out funding. They're doing a lot of good work and could use it. We'll see you next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Have a good one, all.